All right, we'll start off today with a story. I'm sorry I didn't give a class this morning. I had to take someone to the hospital yesterday and night, so I didn't really get any sleep. So here we go. Ready? Story is like this. There was a Chassid, and his name was Rabbi Avram Zaltzman. And this story that I'm telling that they're going to tell you now was told to me by his grandson. And the story starts off like this. This Avram Zaltzman, he passed away, I don't know how long ago, maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Anyway, when he was a boy, and that was, let's say over 100 years ago. Anyway, you can do the mathematics however you want to, but when he was a boy, and this was over 100 years ago, it was in 1919, 1918, something like that. As he was a very wild kid, and he couldn't sit and learn. It was very difficult for him to learn. Now, this story that I'm telling you now that was told to me by his grandson, this story was told by this Avram Zaltzman, this grandfather. It was told at a Farbringen, at a Chassidic get-together. And sitting in the Chassidic get-together was Rabbi Mendel Futterfass. So like he told the story, let's say 50 years ago, right? So the grandfather tells the story, and it goes like this. When I was a young boy, I was very, very wild. And we were learning in the yeshiva, I think it was the yeshiva Lubavitch or Rostov, wherever the yeshiva was. and they gave me and two other boys that were also pretty wild kids. They gave us a job, among the other things, cleaning up. But one of the jobs was to feed the goat. There was a goat. The goat was basically the pharmacy, because they didn't have any other any medicine they took, but they would take milk from the goat, and it was good. It was healthy. It would heal people. So they had to watch the goat. And one day he said, this Avram Zaltzman, he said, we got a little bit bored, and we thought, let's see what happens if we put a little bit of vodka in the water of the goat. So they put water in the vodka in the water of the goat, and they saw the goat really started running around, jumping, hopping, and everything like that. So they got a good idea. And the next day, they put water in the vodka. Before the vodka had a chance to bring its desired effect, as they took the goat, as soon as he started sort of jumping around, getting wild, and they pushed the goat into the huge learning room where they were sitting and learning. Let's say, 50 boys, 100 boys were sitting and learning. The goat started jumping around and knocking over tables. And of course, you can understand what was going on over there, because it was totally unexpected. The boys were sitting and learning. They never expected a thing like this. So some of the boys ran out in horror, and some of the rabbis, also, and some of them were laughing. They thought it was just so humorous, the whole thing. In any case, it was total bedlam, total confusion. And it wasn't hard to figure out who did this, because those were the only three boys that weren't there, and they were wild boys. So they were called the manager of the yeshiva was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. That was before he was Rebbe. This was before he was Rebbe. So his father was the Rebbe. That was the Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Sholem Ber. And the previous Rebbe, he was the Rebbe. He was the manager of the yeshiva. I'm sorry. He was the manager of the yeshiva. So he took the three boys and he said, young man, we knew what you did. And you're here on borrowed time anyway. We wanted to eject you from the yeshiva so many times, but we had mercy on you. And we figured maybe it would work, and we see that it didn't work. So there's a lot of other yeshivas. Go to another yeshiva. You cannot learn here anymore. So the three boys packed up their stuff and they walked to the nearby train station. When they got to the train station, so this Avram Zaltzman, he said, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to go back. Somehow or other, I got to get back into the yeshiva. Another one of the boys said, not me. He said, I've burned all my bridges behind me. I can't go back. A third boy said, okay, I'll go back with, but I'm very afraid. I don't know what to do. So they went back. They had to figure out a way. How could they get back into the yeshiva? So they decided that they're going to go to Rabbanit Rivka. Now, Rabbanit Rivka, she had been the wife of the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, who since passed away. So Rebbe Rivka, she was the mother of the Rebbe Rashab, and the grandmother of the Rebbe Rayatz, who was the manager of the place. So they went to her, and she said, and they told her the whole story, the two boys, and she said, well, to go to my grandson, right, Yosef Yitzchak, you can't go. He kicked you out, and he's very strict. But maybe you can get into my husband, and maybe you can convince him. You know what? Maybe he'll have mercy on you. But I can't take you in. I can just take you up to the room where it is, the hall that leads to the room, and you go in the room yourself. He said at a certain time in the morning, whatever it is, it's 5 a.m, he gets ready to pray. He's standing in his room. Then you can talk to him. So the two boys went up to the house where the Rebbe was preparing himself to pray. And one of the boys said, I'm afraid I'm not going to go in. I'm afraid to see the Rebbe. I don't want the Rebbe to see me. I'm ashamed of what I did. I don't want to go in. You go in alone. Ask for both of us. So he said, okay. So this, remember, Avram Zaltzman is telling the story, right? So he said, so I went in and I went down the hall, and there was the Rebbe standing with his talit over his shoulder. And he said, who are you? So I said my name. He said, well, what do you want? I said, I want to go back in the yeshiva. I said, but you were just evicted from the yeshiva. You did a really bad thing. And we wanted to evict you. We have a lot of reasons that we should have evicted you, right? Expelled you a long time before. And he said, yeah, but I want to go. I want to come back in. I promise I won't do it again. And so he said, listen, why are yeshivas? There's a lot of other good yeshivas. And he listed a bunch of other yeshivas that were in the area, not Chabad. And he said, what about this yeshiva? What about that yeshiva? He said, no, I want to come in. And then he said, this Avram Zaltzman said, and I burst out crying. And the Rebbe saw me crying, so he started to laugh. So I saw the Rebbe laughing. I figured that was it. I'm not going to get back in. And I cried even more. When I cried more, the Rebbe laughed even more. Finally, the Rebbe said, okay, I'll consider it. You're not in, but I'll consider it. I'll talk it over with my son. You can go. So I didn't go. So the Rebbe said, I told you can go. Why aren't you going? He said, because I have a friend outside. I said, this Avram Zaltzman said, I said, I have a friend outside. And the Rebbe said, oh, you have a friend outside? Tell him that he can also come back tomorrow. I'll decide. So they came back tomorrow, the two boys, and they got a big, reproof and whatever. They yelled at them or whatever and told them. And they said, you can come back, but they made strict conditions that he can come back in. And that's the end of the story. That's the story that I heard from this, not the end of the story, you'll see, from the grandson of this Avram Zaltzman, right, that he told. And Avram Zaltzman, he told the story in a Farbrengen. It was Reb Mendel Futterfeld. So Reb Mendel Futterfeld said, they accepted you back in the yeshiva? Rav Avram, they accepted, yes. Why did you think the Rebbe accepted you back in the yeshiva? He said, because I cried. I wanted to go and I cried. And Reb Mendel Futterfeld said, that's not the reason. The reason he accepted you was because you said, I have a friend outside. He saw that you were worried about your friend outside. Therefore, because of your love of another Jew, that's why he took you. So we can learn that our relationship between us and God is very important. And us and the Rebbe and the great leaders is important. But our worry about another Jew, which eventually will lead to a worry for the whole world, but a worry for another Jew is of utmost importance. And that's why Rabbi Akiva said the most important principle of the Torah is the sentence, love your fellow man as yourself.